We're talking about this type of trauma, this type of unhealthy experience that leaves a mark on us, that makes us doubt who we are, that makes us not find our joy anymore. Where do we think that that trauma lives? And what I would say is that it lives in the body. We feel in our gut when something isn't right, right? In our relationship. We know there's a little voice, and that little voice is not coming from the thinking brain. That little voice is coming from something much more ancient, much deeper. Because our brain doesn't make the decision to say, I'm done, I need to go, I can't take this anymore, I've had it. It's that more sensorial part of the brain that really knows and that is sending us these cues, which our confused thinking brain. And why is it confused? It's confused because our society, our family, our community, our externally imposed values are telling us this is what you have to do. And art and the arts, I'll say the arts because I'm not speaking necessarily about painting or necessarily about writing. It's any type of creative self-expression, whether it's through music or painting or sculpture or craft or cooking or whatever your art is. I'm not putting any boundaries on how anyone self-expresses, right? But when we get into a space where we decide to create, that sends us into a very different part of the brain if we're doing it authentically.
Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Omand, co-founder of the Divorce Workshop. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about why it is so powerful to use music and art to heal from your unhealthy relationship. Our expert guest today is Lisa Markovits. Lisa is a singer, a writer, an activist turned international foundational director who has helped tens of thousands of people to take the first steps toward recovering their lives after violence. After 30 years in Ecuador, Lisa has returned to her native U.S. and launched Own It Baby, a company dedicated to helping women on their journey towards health, wealth, and deep happiness. Lisa's first offering is From Caterpillar to Butterfly, Sheep-Herding Women from Trauma to Joy, a self-period paced course that offers a fun, gentle journey to self-love through art and self-expression for Generation X women who have lost touch with themselves due to unhealthy relationships. Welcome, Lisa, to the Just Separated podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Karen.
You as well. So the first kind of question I have is, why do you feel that music and art are so powerful to help heal from those in a divorce or a breakup?
Well, let's put a couple of layers on this, okay? Let's first start talking about what we mean by an unhealthy relationship, a divorce, a breakup. I know that there are times where a divorce can happen. You can still love each other. You can break up still loving each other, and you can be friends, right? But I think what we're talking about here are the divorces and the breakups that happen because something really wasn't right. And usually when something isn't right, it's a power dynamic. There's some level of emotional abuse, one direction or another. There's control issues. There can be all sorts of reasons, right? But basically, we're talking about some kind of situation that caused some level of trauma. And I don't want to abuse that word, but I do want to just say it is something that really hurt us. Let's just leave it at that. Let's not go into technical definitions. Let's just say it's something that hurt us, that made us feel smaller than who we are, that made us doubt our self-worth, stop loving ourselves. And this has a whole range. Like it can go all the way from some very basic, and I say basic in quotes because nothing around this topic is basic, right? And we're all affected in different ways. But some basic lack of respect all the way up to the kind of violence that we would see in some of the work we did as a foundation, right? And the work I do now is not only for that level of violence, it's for the quote unquote everyday violence that we can all live within our unhealthy relationships, right? So if we're talking about this type of trauma, this type of unhealthy experience that leaves a mark on us, that makes us doubt who we are, that makes us not find our joy anymore, where do we think that that trauma lives? And what I would say is that it lives in the body, and it lives in a part of the mind that words cannot reach, because it's a survival instinct. It is, and there's research on this, right? But again, I don't want to get too technical. I just want to talk about it. We feel in our gut when something isn't right, right? In our relationship. We know there's a little voice, and that little voice is not coming from the thinking brain. That little voice is coming from something much more ancient, much deeper, much more us, much more part of our divine spark that is talking to us through the body, sometimes through somatic expressions in the body, different kinds of mystery illnesses. Sometimes it's just coming out at us. Somebody will say something and we will cringe, and our stomach will feel like it's turning or it's knotted, and we'll be like, I don't like that. And so we push it away. And we push it away in part because we live in a society that really values the logical part of our brain. And I'm all for that part of the brain, and I'm all for training it. And I like to think I'm kind of smart, and I've worked with so many other smart women. But that's not the part that needs the healing. Because our brain doesn't make the decision to say, I'm done, I need to go, I can't take this anymore, I've had it. It's that more sensorial part of the brain that really knows, and that is sending us these cues, which our confused thinking brain. And why is it confused? It's confused because our society, our family, our community, our externally imposed values are telling us this is what you have to do, this is what you should do, this is what you could do, this is, all those shoulda, coulda, wouldas are trying to negate what our sensorial brain knows very clearly. Okay, so this is the first level that I would like to talk about. So before I move on to the second level, does this make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. When you mention thinking brain, especially when you're going through a breakup or divorce, that's all you think about. It's not even connecting with that other side of our brain that is not coming out, right? So yeah, makes perfect sense.
Okay, good. So it's also that part of the brain is going crazy, like it's spinning around, it's doing the chess game, like if I move this way, what'll happen? And if I do this, what will he think? And if I do that, what will happen to me? And some of it we do need to play that chess game in a legal sense. If we're in a divorce, we need to be really, cautious and strategic about the way we work. But what we're talking about here is a deeper level of healing. And it's not just going to the courts and trying to get as good a deal as we can for us and for our kids and for all that. I'm talking about healing our soul and healing our heart and trying to come back into who we are. And so now I'll go back to your first question. Why are art and music so powerful? It's because they are exactly the direct path into that part of our brain. So I'll give another example before I go deeper into that. The nose knows, right? Does the nose know? Like, if I say to you, it rained last night, does your nose know how it has to smell?
Yes, it does.
It does, right?
Hmm.
If you open a carton of milk and it's a little old, does your nose know if you can drink it?
Yes, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
these are very simple examples, but the nose knows. Now the nose is connected to a very deep survival instinct part of the brain, right? And so is art. And art and the arts, I'll say the arts because I'm not speaking necessarily about painting or necessarily about writing. It's any type of creative self-expression, whether it's through music or painting or sculpture or craft or cooking or whatever your art is. I'm not putting any boundaries on how anyone self-expresses, right? But when we get into a space where we decide to create, that sends us into a very different part of the brain if we're doing it authentically, right? If somebody just said draw a house and you think and you say, okay, I'll draw a house, it's going to have these four sides and it's going to have a pointed roof and I will paint it blue. Okay, you can do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not talking even about the end product. What I'm talking about is the process. But if you sit there and you honestly say to yourself, a house, home, what does home mean to me? What do I want my home to look like? How do I want to live? How do I want to be treated in my home? What are the colors that bring me joy? What are the sounds that make me feel like I am loved? So I'm extrapolating a little bit, right? But these questions, which are a much deeper exploration, then how can I represent that in something that I create with my hands, with my voice, um, whichever way we choose to, with my whole body, if I'm dancing, for example, right? This gets us into the part of our brain that allows us to connect with what we've been afraid to connect with. And it goes as directly as the nose when it's telling us if that milk is off or if the rain smells right or wrong. I actually wrote a poem about that once. When I got divorced, I wrote a poem called The Rain Smells Wrong. And it did, because all of a sudden, everything that was around me that had seemed like it was a beautiful part of my marriage, it was off. And even the rain smelled wrong. So there is something about art, and this has been studied, as I said, that lets us get into that very deep sensorial part of the brain where the trauma is stored. And it lets us do it in a way that is, I believe, gentler, even though it can have a powerful process which might not feel gentle as you're going through it. But I think it's still gentler and easier than trying to use all sorts of other kinds of therapies, which have their value, but may not get right to the root or may not be sufficient to get to the root, or which we may be afraid to start even down that path. And because art is fun, because it is fun, it's fun to make art, right? Of whatever sort. So that allows us to get past some of the fear, to get past some of the intellectual blockages that we have built ourselves as we have incorporated other people's voices into our thinking brain. But the sensorial brain, it doesn't buy it. It never
Is
does.
there, sorry to interrupt, is there a reason why we as society, I mean, we're really focused on science, I know that. But is there a reason why, if you think about art in general, like we're not just talking about arting, like painting, we're talking about art, like music,
The
dance,
arts. The
poetry,
arts.
the arts. Is there a reason why we've lost that? If you think about centuries ago, I think that's what's type of our therapy, right? Is there a reason, we go to talk therapy, which has its function, and we go see our lawyer and we go see the financial advisor and we go to our support groups. But this is the first time, and I've been in this divorce world for 4 years now. I've been a divorced woman for 7 years. I'm from a divorced family, and this is the first time I've heard how art can really help heal. So I wonder if you have any understanding or why we've kind of just let that go.
Oh, well, that's a big can of worms or a Pandora's box, or call it whatever you want. And I have my own very personal opinions on this. I will just mention that anyone, certainly in the US, you can see it on the internet from anywhere in the world. There are descriptions about the use of the arts as a healing method in cases of extreme domestic violence, for example, that are up on the National Domestic Violence Hotline in the US. I just checked that out last week. There were some very interesting articles that were linked, and there have been a lot of studies. Um, and I've done some studies as part of my foundation. We did a University of Delaware sponsored study working with community and art and music using a very specific methodology, which then forms the basis to some extent for the work that I have derived. I mean, I've done my own version of it, more artistic, more focused on self-expression, but we've done the research as well. But why do we even need to do research when all of us know that when we were a kid, if they put a stick in our hands and there was dirt, we were going to draw. And we had fun doing it. And we might draw whatever was on our mind at that moment. We all know that cave art has existed since human beings exist. We all know that drum circles or conch playing, I think you pronounce it conch, right? Is it conch conch? Anyway, those big shells. Um, we've been playing those. We have been, do 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 do, giving important news. Got a trumpet fanfare in medieval Europe. Music and art have been around forever. So the question you're asking is a really important question. which is really why have we put that on the back burner at all when it is basic human existence. It's one of the things that distinguishes us from the animal kingdom is that, we make the music. Although, again, whales sing, right? Dolphins have a singing sound, if I'm not mistaken. The plants, they've done studies, they react differently if you play nice music for them. So it's a basic part of nature, and yet I have also questioned, why are we poo-pooing it? Why are we saying, why do we need to, not why do we need to study it? There's always value in studying things. There's value in quantifying things. There absolutely is. And in using those studies to determine what would be the best way to help somebody. I value that. But at the same time, I question again, as you are, why is this on the back burner? I could give you some perhaps realistic, perhaps cynical reasons for it. I'll let the listeners decide how they want to categorize the answer. I do believe that it's harder to quantify. I do believe it is harder to set up, the blind, controlled studies with art. It also can set off processes that are hard for societies to control. Because when you pick up art from a very authentic place, you are more empowered. And so I believe that's the value of using the arts as a way to empower women. I'm going to specifically focus on women, even though I think, again, this is a very big conversation, right? And I think men actually need some empowerment in healthy masculinity as well. But my focus is on the women. And when we walk out of an unhealthy relationship, a breakup, a divorce, we are generally injured in our souls. It's the best way I can say it. We have been hurt, and we have been maybe in some ways empowered to do something, but at the same time, it's usually as a reaction to having been broken down for so long. And so when I say that art empowers and that it shepherds women from trauma to joy, that is the idea, is come into your space, have agency. You create what you want to create. Maybe you couldn't do it in your marriage. Maybe you couldn't do it in the life you meant to create, and you spent 25 years in a marriage, and now you're sitting here saying, why did I waste my time on this if I had known how it was going to end? And I think we've all asked ourselves that question if we've been divorced, right? I have, absolutely. I do believe, though, that it's leading us towards something if we can step into our true selves. And that's where I think art steps in. And so it can be scary. It can be scary to the powers that be. It can be scary to us because if we're really going to create authentically, we basically have to step off a cliff and trust that someone or something or some power or some energy is going to be there to hold us and lift us up to an even higher place. That's a leap of faith. And I'm not going to prescribe any particular religious belief around this. I just feel like we artists are ones who take the first steps. You give us a blank page and we do something with it. You give us a hunk of clay and we do something with it. You give us nothing but a room and a body and we dance something out of it. So we have become creators as soon as we do that. And to give people or remind them of their power, because you don't give it to anybody, we all have it, right? But to remind us and to hold space for that power of creation to move back into our lives means we can't be controlled so easily. So again, am I being realistic? Am I being cynical? Maybe a little bit of both. But I prefer to be empowered, personally.
Yeah, I think art is empowering. I'll tell you a little story of myself. Is I went to a Kintsugi bowl. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No,
I
I
think it's
haven't.
Japanese. And you go in, and it's a ceremony type of thing, and you break a bowl, and you have to put that bowl back together, and it's like a meditation,
Uh-huh.
right? And so each of it's all individual, and you take a special like golden color glue, and you have to put that bowl back together. And the tears that came out, we shared after, whether it was a death loss, divorce loss, job loss, whatever it was, right? But building, like, it was just taking that bowl and smashing it and putting it back together to our type of life was really cathartic. It was, as you said, like it was healing in a way. And the thing about it, Lisa, is we didn't really have to talk a lot. As you said with art, like it's just we were all in it. It was like a 3 hour thing, and I know because I'm in the grief world that art therapy is used a lot, right? It is used. I just found it, I'm just finding it frustrating that it's not more used in the divorce world because of everything you've said and how great it would be to have this tool along with other tools. We in society, you eat right, uh, go to the gym or do your walks, right? Keep your, rediscover yourself, right? This is all the recovery part of divorce. But it's so refreshing to hear you coming out with, well, no, let's look at this as well, right?
Well, there are many, many ways to do it, and I see my work as being a complement to all the other ways, not a
Mm-hmm.
substitute for them. And again, as I said, we need our thinking heads with us as we negotiate, especially the legal world of divorce and custody and the finances, and it can be very, very complex. We need to figure out how we're going to support ourselves if we weren't already doing it before. We need to figure out a new life, either alone or as a single mother or sharing kids. There's so many things that come up in a divorce, none of which are easy, right? But yes, I really think that this is a powerful additional tool. I did not know the name of the technique you were just talking about. I was aware of the technique, and I have personally seen, I have a son who is very talented with his hands, and we broke a plate, a beautiful ceramic plate, and he decided to put it together. And it's actually more beautiful now than it was before. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at when I talk about using art to heal. We can't erase the past, but we can find a way to process it and transmute it into something else. We can turn it into gold in a very alchemic, like an alchemy process, right? Um, it is something that we can do, and we can have all those breaks, and we can have those scrapes, and we can have those bruises, but we can. I'm talking about emotional ones, right? But we can turn them into something where we can say, well, I've been there, I've done it, I'll never do it again. I'm going to find out what I really want, and I'm going to go out and get it. And, especially for those of us who married young and were in a relationship for a long time, or maybe we had a series of unhealthy relationships and then just continued it through our marriages, that is something that we can forget who we really are and what we want. So I really believe that when we take up a paintbrush or a pen to write a poem, or we start learning to create a song on a guitar or whatever it is that is your art form, right? And again, it's not the product at the end, it's the process. So there's no judgment here as to, oh, I'm a great painter or I'm a miserable vocalist. No, it's not. It's none of that. It's the process of going through it. And I also want to recognize the other thing that you just talked about. You did it in a communal space, right? You did that work with a group. Now, I've been amused the last couple of weeks. The word body doubling, the term body doubling, keeps coming into my sphere with people talking about how important it is, especially with neurodivergence, to just have somebody sitting there next to them so that they can do their work, they can focus. Um, when I was living in Ecuador, they used the Spanish word acompañar. Acompañar means just to accompany. Again, very, very basic human desires being met, that I don't think we really need to put all these fancy terms on. You can paint something and you can have fun doing it, and that can heal you. And you can have someone accompany you through it, because knowing that community is around, that's the basis of humanity. That is how we built societies. It seems sometimes so ridiculous to me to have to explain it, but I will, because not everybody sees it that way. But I see it that way. We have one person, and they form a family, and then they would form, a clan, and they would form a tribe. I hope I'm getting the order right. And that would eventually grow into a village, and then the villages would join, and we would have a city, and then we would have a nation state, and so on and so forth. That is the history of humanity, is people accompanying other people. Now, there was also some violence in there. It's not all so touchy-feely lovely, right? Because, not every clan really agreed with the other clan, right? But nevertheless, feeling accompanied is a basic part of being a human being. And when we're going through something that is difficult, whether it's a loss from death or it's the grief from divorce, whether there's illness, whether there is financial hardship, whatever it is that's bothering us, we have, again, a hardwired need to be accompanied. And so as I built what I built, I said, I have to find a way to help people experience what you experienced, Karen, in your space, rebuilding this bowl. How can I help them do it on a mass scale? That's what I wanted to figure out, because I know there are millions of women who are suffering. And so I wanted to figure out a way that I could somehow package all of this ancestral knowledge and everything we learned as a foundation, and try to find a way to help women heal themselves so that they could feel accompanied, yet do it on their own when they felt safe, when they felt brave enough to do it, and to then still be able to share. And that is what I have been trying to build. And again, it seems so crazy, as you say, that in the divorce world where people are hurting, why are we not looking at this particular tool? Why has it been relegated to the back? I don't understand it. But here I am trying to change that and help as many women as I possibly can along the way.
Yeah, I just find it, I'm a piano player as well. And I think, the way I look at it is the more tools we have going through this process, the better we'll fare, right? And when you just focus solely on the divorce throughout and that's it, and you don't have any other tools, that's when you can get stuck in it, right? And so thinking about an art, and I just want to make mention, like, as you kept saying today, is that it doesn't have to be, it's not perfect art. And I think there's this self-judgment we have, is that, okay, because I've always said, I'm going to be honest, Lisa, I am not creative that way at all, right? And my daughter, she's extremely creative. Like, her artwork was at art shows, and I'm like, so I have that self-judgment going, oh no, I'm not going there, right? And I'm my assumption, and I don't like assuming things, is that for a lot of people, they feel that, okay, well, I can't really do this stuff, right? But that's not what you're saying, right?
No, absolutely
You're,
not.
yeah.
I mean, in my
Sorry, go
case, look,
ahead.
I have never done really a lot of visual art, although I shouldn't say that. You just brought back a memory by asking that question. When I was a kid, I used to like to paint and draw. And then I stopped as I got older because it wasn't good enough, right? So why should I keep going? Maybe a teacher said something, maybe a parent, I don't even remember, but I just stopped, right? But I do paint with words, I paint with music, all of which are present in the course. But I've done a lot of painting with words as my color palette, right? Um, but I haven't done any of those other. I cook as well. I really like to cook, and I know just enough on the piano to be dangerous. But I never perform on the piano because I don't know enough. And I am a professional vocalist, so I do want the piano to actually sound, high level, like I hope my singing sounds. But when we talk about this in the case of the course, and for anybody who's listening to us, you don't have to be a poet. You don't have to be a vocalist. You don't have to be a painter. You can go out and do the art form that Karen was just describing, and I forgot the name of it. What was it called? The
Kansingi?
Japanese. Cons-
I'll put it
yes.
in the show
Uh,
notes. Yeah.
okay, yeah, too, because I want to look up more about it too.
Mm.
It can be that. It can be crafting. It can be sewing. It can be gardening. There are so many art forms. Now, you may end up, because of what I ask in the course, people might choose not to do certain things. I don't know. They might not want to garden because there's going to be a place where I'm going to ask you to destroy your work of art. And so, you may not want to pull up the garden that you just planted. So you might have to pick something that's a little more traditional artistic, like drawing or painting or sculpting or recycled art or whatever it is. But it's really not about the finished product. It really is about how you feel while you make it. It's about the process. It's about how you let yourself let go. Let go of all the thinking mind controls and go deep inside in a space that you may not have visited in a long time, and do it in a fun way. by creating. And again,
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is to recover our agency, our free will to make what we want. And when I talk about this and how important it is in art, just as an example, when my other son was little, very little, maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, I set him up in my laundry room with a makeshift easel and some paints and a piece of paper, right, on a clipboard. And he was painting, and I just walked in innocently, and I was looking at him, and I was like, wow, that's really great. What a terrific piece of artwork. Are you done? Are you ready to come eat some milk and cookies? And he stood there, all 3 years old of him, and put his hands on his hips, and he looked at me and he said, Mom, I am the artist. I decide when it's done. Maybe he was 4. I don't know. But anyway, he
Oh,
was,
that's cute.
I decide when it's done. And I just backed out quietly and I said, you're right. You decide when it's done. Because it's our choice. It's our piece of art. And if we have been in a relationship where we were never allowed to decide, where we were told what to do, what to think, what to wear, oh, that lipstick doesn't look good on you, or you look fat wearing that those pants. You should be wearing dresses, or nobody's going to like how you do XYZ something at work. Why are you even bothering to work? And I have unfortunately heard these kind of phrases so many times. I'm not even going to discuss some of the intimate things that I have heard as a foundation director, right? So when we have been told all these things, and you have to do it my way, because it's my way or the highway. And then finally, there is no highway because it's done, it's over, and you're sitting there alone and you have forgotten what it means, like to create your own path. So when you go in and you have that piece of canvas or paper, or like I said, clay, or whatever it is that you're going to do, you choose. And that can be really scary. And so it's great to know you're within a framework and with people accompanying you, because that can be really scary.
Yeah, it can be, right? To lean into that, especially when we haven't been able to.
That's right. That's right. And that's why it's so powerful.
So before we talk about your program, I ask everybody one final question. And it's for someone who just separated, whether they were left or were the lefter, whatever, either or. What advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
So many types of advice. And I think it really depends on each person. And I really respect each person's finding their own path. But I would talk about body, mind, and spirit, right? So in terms of the body, I would certainly talk about very increased and enhanced self-care, whatever that means to you. It might mean that on a couple of days you're binging some of the things that you know aren't so good for your body, but you give yourself the grace to do that for a few days. In general, probably try to eat healthy. Try to get some amount of exercise every day, whether gentle exercise, yoga, a walk out in nature. If you can get your bare feet on the grass, even better. See the sunshine every day. I think there's that body part, and mind part, certainly. Take care to find the advice that you need, whether it's through a divorce coach or a lawyer, an accountant, whatever you're going to need, in a psychologist for sure, a therapist of some sort. Doesn't have to be a psychologist, but whatever type of therapy that you believe in, I think is very important, because you're going to need someone to hold you. And in terms of spirit, I would invite figuring out as best you can at that moment what can bring you some immediate peace. So it can be certainly a lot of deep breathing. It can be a lot of things like emotional freedom technique. There's all sorts of other energy techniques that you can use to calm your nervous system, because as long as your nervous system is spiraling out of control, you will not be able to make any good decisions. And in fact, you're running the risk of making some very bad ones. So I do think, EMDR is great in a crisis moment. There's a lot of different techniques that can be used. Praying is helpful. If you are a religious person, prayer can be very, very powerful. And then, of course, I'm never going to not say to you, go make something. because I'm always going to tell you to go make something, whatever that may be, whatever your preferred creative self-expression, because you can get, I mean, you can get the anger, the impotence, the frustration, you can get it out. And once you get it out, it hurts you less, you know? And if you can share, if you find someone who is worthy of your trust, because not everybody is. So, you know, shouting it out on the rooftops, shouting it out over social media, not my preferred way of doing things. We've certainly seen some Hollywood stars and musicians, and they take their beefs all the way, you know, up to big public events. But um, for most of us, it's a more private thing after a divorce. But if you can find someone to accompany you, someone who's willing to listen, whether it's a paid friend or just a friend, that is going to be very, very valuable for you. And just give yourself grace. I think the most important thing is to give ourselves grace. Um, and going back to the art piece, one of the interesting things that happened to me when I first separated, I used to hate poetry. Like I hated poetry. I studied a bunch of literature in college. I always read novels, never read poetry. I didn't like it. And then immediately after I got divorced, over the course of 6 months, I wrote, I don't know, maybe 100 poems. I had never written poetry. I had not read any more poetry than what any of us gets in our standard, you know, school literature class, which isn't a lot, you know. Um, I needed to write poetry. And why? Because poetry goes directly to the emotional, right? Poetry is much more directly to the emotional and to the sensorial than it is to the thinking brain. Again, you have to think to write good poetry. I'm never negating that side, okay? And, you know, the amount of training you've had is going to help you have more colors on your palette when you write the poetry. But it doesn't matter. Again, this is not for publication. This is for you. And it was for me. Who knows? Will I ever publish it? I might someday. Um, but I will have gotten past it, right? So that's why I could publish it. That's part of the phase of first you make it for you. And that's how it's real art. You made it just for you. And if you then decided to bring it out into a more public space, it can set off a similar chain reaction in others and give them the chance to say, wow, that reached me. But it's not exactly what I want to say or how I would say it. Maybe I can write a poem now, or maybe I can paint it. You know, that's why painters have music on, and musicians are perhaps, you know, reading a poetry book or I don't know, painting, because all the arts, they all connect and they all go to the same spot. So, you know, again, mind, body, soul. You can't. It's not just go out and make art. It's art. Yes, it's maybe a way to heal your spirit. You got to look at the mind part to make sure you are properly advised on anything you need to know legally. Talk therapy can be very helpful. Um, it'll help you make decisions in many ways. And we need to look at our spirit. And our spirit needs healing, whether it's prayer or energy work or art or any of these tools can be helpful. And just give yourself some grace. That's my most important message. Give yourself some grace. This is a loss. It is grief. And we need to go through all the stages and give ourselves the grace to do it so that when we come out on the other side, we are fully healed.
I love that you're putting, like, that you're trying to get the word out about this and trying to make people more aware. So, can you tell us about this caterpillar to butterfly program you have?
Of course. Thank you for asking me. And yes, I do want to get the word out because I think it can help so many people live such a profound transformation. So, from caterpillar to butterfly, shepherding women from trauma to joy is, as you said in the intro, it's a self-paced digital course. Now, what does that mean? It means you have recorded modules. And there's some pros, there's some challenges with that, right? But I made it this way, at least as an initial offering, because I want women to be able to do this when the muse strikes them, when they feel safe. Because if we have been in or are currently in an unhealthy relationship, sometimes we're not safe, even in our own home. And we need to be able to do this at a moment. And I also know women who like working at 2 a.m. A lot of artists do that too, right? or they like working at 9 a.m. once the kids went off to school. So I created this course. It has 5 modules and a couple of bonus modules, including an EFT tapping session, that's emotional freedom technique, which I included in case any of the work triggers anybody and they need to help calm their nervous system. So they have this module and they can go through the tapping whenever they need to. So it's there forever. There's a meditation as well, and there's a Facebook community. And that Facebook community is a way for us to accompany each other. And I am very excited to say that we have gotten started already. We have some amazing things going on in the community. All the women are lifting each other up. We've had one woman who needed help for herself, then gave a scholarship to another woman who really needed the support but couldn't afford it. And that is creating sisterhood, and that is creating the kind of community that I always envisioned having. We've had some very heartfelt testimonials that I can't share really because it's a private community, but there is one woman who just came out and said, "I'm free. I am finally." And 1 month ago, before I started all of this, I thought I'd be trapped in a narcissistic relationship forever, and now I'm free. She happens to be an artist, and she has created a piece of work that I think is museum quality, to be honest. But again, that is not the goal of how we do art. So just to give a basic description, the course is currently priced at $97, and you get the 5 modules, 2 bonus modules, access to the community. And the modules in and of themselves, yes, I do some teaching, of course, but really they are an invitation to you to go out and create and to find creative ways, sorry to repeat the word, but creative ways to get what is weighing on you, what your sensorial brain has been telling you through your gut forever, out into something, a dance, a song, a poem, a story, a craft, a dish of food, whatever it is that is your way of creating, get it out into that, and then we're going to get rid of it. And by doing this, we're going to exorcise it from us in a very general sense of that word. Again, I know that religious faith helps a lot of people through moments like this, and if that's what helps you, I'm all for it. But again, this is a non-religious program, right? So when I talk about an exorcism, I'm not talking about it in any religious sense, but more in a transformative sense of recognize those feelings, put a name on them, put a color to them, somehow express them. And by doing that, cleanse your system of them. And then once you've cleansed your system, in our final module, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning more about self-care. And then we're going to be moving forward into sort of setting a dream. What do I want to manifest for myself? What is it that I actually want in my life at this point? And it is a course that you can do in a minimum of 5 weeks. The content is dripped out once a week because, again, I don't want you binging the content. That's not the idea. The value in this course is that I am holding space, I think pretty powerfully, for you to feel safe to create. And that homework is the value of the course, even more than the teaching. It's what you do for you, more than me teaching you how to do, right? So that's the course, and we are currently going through it. It's meant to be an individual course. That's why it's self-paced. But I decided to start it out with a cohort of first butterflies who are helping me just give me some feedback, tell me what they think, how I could make the course even better. We're seeding the community. We're creating a community of women who I personally know in most cases, not everyone, but almost everyone, and who we are used to holding each other up. And that is the energy that I want to have in that Facebook community. That's our cocoon. That's where you get to do your metamorphosis. And so it was very important to me that anyone who comes in finds already an active community, because this is a new course, right? We're just launching this pretty recently. And so that's what we've been creating. It is going wonderfully. I'm very excited. And again, you can do the course in 5 weeks. It could also take you a year. When does your muse come to you? When do you have the strength or the inspiration to make that piece of art. So you might take longer, you might do it a little faster, but again, it's up to you. And then what we're going to be exploring first with this first cohort of butterflies is, do we also want to then have some other options, some individual coaching, some group coaching, some kind of a membership? Do we want to get together and go on retreats together? I mean, there's so many things that we could as a community decide, but I want that to come from the community, not from me. So the idea was to create this course at a very, very reasonable price. It's actually less than one session with a divorce coach or certainly a lawyer, a psychotherapist, and give you a tool in a way that you can heal yourself. And then even know better which specialists you need to go to. Because if you're clear on what you want, you're going to say, oh no, I do need my hand held through this. I better find a coach, or I better go to a divorce coach, or I better find a better lawyer, or I really want to do a deep dive into music or art or gardening or whatever it is, because I find that this brings me peace. So there's also going to be recommendations of different kinds of programs and practitioners who have, let's say, group memberships or whatever, that I'm going to give you as a way to continue your journey. Because you'll start with me, and then we'll see where it takes you. But I want this to be first steps. I want it to accompany you, and I want you to know it's the safe place for you to find your cocoon that holds you, that allows you to transform into the most beautiful butterfly possible.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like a really great program. And I love that the community aspect, because we know anytime you go through any type of a divorce, whether it's moderate conflict or high conflict, the more community support you have and the tools. And I'm so glad you're bringing this up to the forefront for us to know about, so we can spread the word that this can be an amazing way to help in your recovery from divorce. So I want to thank you for coming on, and all the stuff will be in the show notes on how to get in touch with you and in your program and your website. So thank you, Lisa, for bringing this to us, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Well, I look forward to it as well, and I hope you'll also include in the show notes, we have a document which people might find interesting. It's a checklist that will allow you to realize if you have been or are in an unhealthy relationship. That's free. And it's something that maybe we can share with your listeners, Karen, as a way for them to determine, if this is something that could even benefit them, or if they want to look for some other help, but for them to determine, where they are standing in their journey. I hope we can keep including that as well, because I want us all to realize that we have a right to be happy, to be well, to be respected, to be loved. And, it's people like you who are allowing me to get the word out and doing your own wonderful work in community. And so I want to thank you for that as well. And just thank you for this space. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery, a must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.